this is David Stark from WatcherPass.com, your website for movie reviews, interviews, and recommendations. Today I'm joined by Kieron J. Walsh, the director, co-writer, and executive producer of The Racer, an all-new film based on the Tour de France. It's available digitally on pretty much any platform, and it also stars Louis Talpe, Matteo Simoni, and Tara Lee. We're going to talk to Kieron in just a second, but first let's check out the trailer.
May I take this opportunity to say what an honor it is to host the first Tour de France outside mainland Europe.
Dom is going to be riding in the Tour de France on Saturday.
You gonna win?
No, I'm a support rider. I use my energy for the lead rider to win.
Don't you ever want to win yourself?
Of course. But that's a dream.
I hear this is your last tour. Tough.
I need to know about next year. My contract.
You're nearly 39 years old. What do you want me to say?
The team needs your focus, nothing to distract you.
What's the worst that can happen?
If you don't take it, you won't win.
Now give me.
Why risk your life like that?
Everybody does it.
You're not even allowed to win. You're a loser. Professional loser.
Without a bike, I'm nobody.
3, 2, 1.
Hey, Kieron.
Hello there. How are you?
Doing well. How are you?
Not too bad. Not too bad. The sun is shining. So when the sun shines in Ireland, it's always a good sign.
Very, very good. Yes, exactly. I'm ready for this. I got my workout shirt. I got my water bottle. My daughter's helmet.
Have you got your EPO? That's the big question.
No. If I would not do that. That would be against all the rules.
Yeah. What am I saying? My God.
Yeah. No. I did wake up at like 3 o'clock when my heart rate started dropping just to get it back up. But
Where are you, by the way? What part of America are you in?
I'm in Washington, D.C. So I've been to Ireland once, and it was on a school trip, which was a lot of fun. We actually marched in the St. Patrick's Day parade in Dublin.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's quite a thing to do.
Before I could really enjoy it, but it was still fun.
Yeah. Excellent. There's not many that have that claim to fame. I've never marched in the St. Patrick's Day parade, so you've got one up on me,
You've more stumbled through the St. Patrick's Day parade, or?
Yeah. Stumbled through the night after the St. Patrick's Day parade. Yeah, it is one of those nights that anything can happen.
Exactly. All right. Well, so thank you so much for joining me. I don't know if you've read the review, but I really loved the film. I really loved how honest it was. Like, I liked at the very start where it's just, this is, was it 1998, the Tour de France came to Ireland. This is inspired by that. Like, no questions of whether this is a real story. I love that because then you can kind of really frame it. So, I assume that.
Interesting that you'd picked up on that because it was, part of it was that I didn't want people to think that, that this character existed or any of these characters existed, but actually there are parallels to, for example, the Italian character Tartare. The guy who won it that year was a guy called Pantani. And he was a great cyclist, but ended up dead from a cocaine overdose in a hotel on his own.
Oh,
you know
wow.
what I mean? That's he was a very interesting character, very insecure. He was so egotistical. He was called the Bat because his ears used to stick out a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So even though that was and the Pirate, he's given all these nicknames, and then he ended up having his ears surgically pushed back against his head because he was so vain about being called the Bat. So yeah, troubled characters. So I didn't want that to be people to think, oh, this is the story of Pantani or this is the story of this guy or that guy. That was really what that was about.
Yeah. Well, one of my big pet peeves is if it says like inspired by true events, and then you have to kind of like piece together like, well, what is and what isn't. And I just like that this was just straight up, this is based on this event, but this is all a fictional dramatization of it, which is always nice to hear.
Yes. Good.
So did you watch the Tour de France in 1998? Like, I guess, how did this story kind of build in your head? Because I know you were one of the co-writers of it.
That's right. Yeah. Well, actually, I lived in London for quite a long time. I went to college in London, and then I came back to Dublin, and I moved into this apartment on quite a well-known square in Ireland called Merrion Square. And I parked my car outside the house, tall Georgian buildings. And when I came back down to the car later, there was a note on the car saying that I'm going to have to move my car, that I won't be able to park it there for the next few days because of the Tour de France. Now, I didn't really know much about the Tour de France. I knew that this thing was going to be coming to town. I didn't know the big deal of it, really. We weren't really brought up with a big cycling tradition here in Ireland. But I knew that it was a cool event, so I was quite happy to move my car and then watch the actual stage go through the square when on the day. And
that's awesome.
In actual fact, the scene in the film, the first stage of the film, where you see them get off the bus and up to the start line and off they go, that's actually Merrion Square where I used to live. So I recreated it 20 years later, that spot that it was taking place in, which is quite cool. Outside my apartment, my ex-apartment.
You didn't want to go back and just relive the glory days.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, no. So it was that. So and it was we had the impression, and most people probably did, that the Tour de France was the coolest, sexiest, most sophisticated sporting event in the world, and the hardest sporting event in the world. But actually, once, because of all the drug scandal that happened to it, and the fact that the Tour nearly imploded actually that year, it nearly didn't make it across the line, and they were talking about it might be the last Tour de France ever, and so when people started doing research and there was books written and articles and all sorts of stuff, what we discovered actually was there was a lot of working class European and some American, but mostly European cyclists, holed up in cheap hotels doing a lot of drugs, basically, and then there was stories of them, running up and down the corridors at 2 o'clock. You hear people running up and down the corridors of the hotel at like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. It's like to try and keep their heart rates up, and people on bikes in rooms, which is quite an unusual thing to have a bike on rollers in a room. But that was what that was about. So quite fascinating. And then really what Kieron, my co-writer, Kieron Cassidy, it is just the idea of telling the story of a domestique rather than a champion, a sprinter, a guy who's going to win. And I've always been interested in those guys who slave away, trying to support the people who are going to get the glory, and feel quite satisfied with that in their lives. Like, domestiques, they are an essential part of the cycling team. And, they call it a team sport for individuals, cycling. And, but these guys, and there's a few of them in each team, they circle like worker bees around the queen bee until it's time for them to go and take the stage. And I just, they never really get the recognition they deserve, except for within the world of cycling. Outside of that world, nobody really knows that much about these guys, and I found that quite fascinating. So that's why we told that story rather than the story of, Tartare, for example, and his story.
Yeah, no, I love that aspect of it because, perfect point that, people, they don't get much praise outside the world of cycling. I had no idea, that was part of this team. I didn't even know the teams really existed in the Tour de France. So seeing that aspect was really interesting, and kind of seeing this person whose whole job is to support the alpha, or, the queen bee, like you call them, was a really kind of fascinating experience.
Very sophisticated sport, really. You think people you just get on a bike and see you can go the fastest, but actually it's a really quite sophisticated sporting, method of and system, basically, of how to win, and like, even things like, there's an Irish guy who won the green jersey in the Tour de France yesterday, called Sam Bennett, and I was amazed to see that he'd actually decided to finish the entire tour, because most sprinters, when it comes to the mountain stages, they just peel off and they don't go anymore. That's the end of their partaking in the Tour de France, and they just leave it up to the climbers, to do the mountains. But this guy, he stuck the distance, and he got himself the green jersey. So it was a good day for Ireland yesterday.
Very good, and good timing for this movie to be released.
Absolutely, yeah.
um, yeah, like so one thing that I noticed, and then this might just be kind of the way it was portrayed, is it seemed like the domestique kind of has more, like it seems like they have to have their body in better shape. Like it seems like the star is kind of built for that one moment, but the way that you portrayed Dom, he's like going up and down the line, he's delivering things, he's kind of making sure everyone is in line, and then also he's acting as a wind blocker for the star. Is that kind of, was that like how domestiques kind of are? They just kind of have to do everything and kind of exhaust themselves just so that the one star can kind of get that last sprint?
Yes, pretty much. I mean, the Dom himself in the racer is what's known as a super domestique, which so if you think about it basically like this, there's really kind of one or two sprinters in each team, and all of the other riders are essentially domestiques. But there's a super domestique who kind of keeps the domestiques in line, and he's kind of like, he's called a lead out man, and he would be there to lead out the team, basically. You know what I mean? And strategically, he'd be involved in with the trainers and stuff like that. He would be in constant contact with the car, thinking of strategy and how to move ahead and when to make a break and all that kind of stuff. So it is quite a responsible position, and it's a grueling task. And they do have to be really, really fit. They have to be all rounders, And in actual fact, they're like, they are not allowed. It's very much frowned upon if they decide they're going to go and take a stage, or it's really frowned upon. Like really, like the anger within the team would be palpable. So it's a really interesting world. Just the idea of like agreeing to go, yeah, I'm not going to go, I'm not going to win, I'm going to just help him get there, and that's that.
Yeah,
It's a particular kind of man to be satisfied with that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's, the brilliance of your film is it kind of explores that aspect as well. I guess when that does happen, is there, you said there's outrage on the team, does that get kind of, and it probably gets buzz in the cycling world, but does that also kind of translate into like larger, more mainstream buzz as well? Or is it just kind of...
Actually, I'm thinking back to, there was an Irish rider who did something like this many years ago. His name is Stephen Roach, and this is he's a phenomenal rider at the time, and he won the Tour de France, he won the World Championships, and he won the Giro d'Italia, all in the same year. So he won all three of them. And he was a domestique originally, right? Mm-hmm. And when he decided to win the Tour de France, a lot of the fans were so pissed off with him because they wanted the leader of the team the sprinter to win, that they basically, when he was coming across the line, they filled their mouths with wine, red wine, which is a tradition to spit the red wine onto somebody, but they filled their mouths with red wine and rice, hard rice, and spat the rice and the wine at him. You know what I mean? But you couldn't tell that there was rice in it, but he could tell because it hit him, and it was really quite sore. So it was a bittersweet moment for him. So yeah, it's you're taking your life in your hands if you're going to do something like this.
Hey everyone, this is where we get into some spoilers about the film. So if you haven't seen the movie, I would go and check it out. It's available on demand digitally, so you can see it, pretty quickly on pretty much any device, and then come back and finish the interview. So thank you so much. And if you don't care about spoilers, then feel free to plow ahead and finish this race. But if you do, then I would imagine, I would say, end this leg of the interview and come back later. Thank you. And that's so strange because it's, it seems like you said, the it's biking. It's just the best person win. Just keep going. You had a line in there when I think the leader of the owner of the team said, the strategy is you turn the wheel, you turn the wheel, and you turn it again, which is I think how a lot of people probably think of biking. So you'd think that if a domestique wanted to take the Tour de France and had the physical ability to do it, like everyone would be all for that. Just kind of let the person who can do it win. But
what's interesting though as well, there is a sneaking admiration I think in there. Like even though he did something that is kind of really, really kind of frowned upon, there was a sneaking, even from Matteo, there's a sneaking admiration in there because they kind of go, well, he won the yellow jersey. What can we do about that now? Like, we can be pissed off or we can just use it to our advantage. And that's why the situation came about at the end of the film.
Yeah, it's one of those weird, conundrums that you would get if a domestique wins, then they've got the yellow jersey, they've got, a leg, which I imagine is important for the overall team finish. But now everyone's angry at them, so it's kind of the test of the professional
I
and
think,
personal relationship.
yeah, and I think his real modus operandi with regard to deciding to go for that final stage was to commemorate Sonny, because again, in cycling, once you're finished, you're finished. You know what I mean? You're just kind of thrown onto the trash heap, and that's what was really surprising for him. How dispensable people are. I mean, most sports are the same, but cycling is a very extreme sport, and especially if you've served a team like a domestique serves a team for the whole of his career, to then be just tossed aside seems really quite cruel. And I think he felt the same about his soigneur, his Sonny the soigneur. So he wanted to do this, and it felt like an honourable way to sort of break the rules by going and doing it for Sonny.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he definitely he had that armband on to kind of show who it was for. So
Yeah.
One of the things I also love, I talked a little bit about the accuracy, is there's all these little touches that kind of, I imagine, are straight out of real cycling stories. Like one of the first scenes where they order food, and it's 5 plates of pasta and a beef tartare with a raw egg or something like that. I guess where did you kind of come up with those ideas, or were they from stories you heard about how teams prepare?
Yeah, they're basically from both communicating with cycling teams and reading. Like, I did an awful lot of reading, to be honest. Like, I read everything you could possibly read about the sport and the research of it. And I read where they weigh their food, when there's like literally you can see Tartare's weighing his steak to make sure it's not too much, and he's taking bits off. But what he'd really like to do is eat the hamburger, and Sonny's just doing it to wind him up, just to make fun of him, really, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
But the rest of them, plain pasta is kind of what they used to have, because it's just all about energy at that stage, and you can eat plenty of it, but that's about it, really. So yeah, there's I did as much research as I could to try and they can have fun with those things as well. I know that I heard stories where teams would sit around, and when it came to dessert, everybody would be looking at each other to see if anybody was going to dare to order some ice cream or something like that. They'd be literally just watching and waiting to see who's going to make the move. And then one of them would make the move, and another one would make the move. And then some of them would be sort of, well, I'm not going to do that. And like literally showing off. It's real macho behavior in the world of cycling,
Yeah, and that's that kind of also goes into some of the other scenes that I really love. It did feel like there was this kind of like family aspect to it. Like it felt like they were just a bunch of brothers, like a bunch of rowdy, in shape brothers who just kind of were ribbing each other, but also looking out for each other. I guess I assume that was also from the research of the stories.
The whole idea of the team becoming Dom's family really is kind of like it pervades the whole film and the whole script. Originally, it was like, he left his own family. He hadn't been in contact with his family for a long time, and this is his new family. And even at the very end, Viking says to him, all families have their ups and downs, about the fight that he had with Tartare. And Lynn comes in, and Lynn introduces him to her family, and he's never really been in that situation. We're in the pub singing and having fun, and dad and uncle and all that kind of stuff. That it's really alien to him, but it's a very Irish thing, And I think that's why he was torn about whether to go home and go to the funeral, or, I mean, who is his family really? Ultimately, who is his family? So that was kind of that was an important part of it, actually.
Yeah, who is his family, and who does he feel kind of obligation to? Right, that was a very important part.
Mm.
So this film also touches on some of the darker aspects of cycling, the drug use and the doping. That was kind of some of the scariest scenes in the film. Is that you mentioned that in Ireland, when it was in Ireland, there were these stories. I guess all of that is kind of accurate portrayals of kind of what these athletes went through to try to compete.
Well, do you know what the difficult thing about it is? I did give the script and talk to a number of cyclists about taking EPO and the effects it has, and tried to sort of, I even met cyclists who were on the tour in 1998, and I broached the subject of whether there was an accurate portrayal or whether they had any experience, and it kind of just wasn't answered. And I just realized then, even though these guys are retired and all that, I realized that if by saying, yeah, that's an accurate portrayal, that's implicating them. And they're saying, yeah, I recognize that because I did it. And they're never going to admit that. There is an omerta in the world of cycling about this kind of stuff. So, it is, I did talk medically. I talked to people about the effects of EPO and the idea there has been a number of deaths, or there had been a number of deaths where heart rates just dropped so low they stopped and guys went to bed and never woke up. That's absolutely true. And the stories of people running up and down corridors, absolutely true. And bites in rooms, absolutely true. So, but whether they were you'll never get anybody saying I was running up and down the corridor because I'd taken too much EPO, and you're never going to get that, unfortunately. But from a medical perspective, it's absolutely accurate.
That is some scary stuff, and that kind of touches in on a lot of the themes of this film. It seems like the film, I got wrestler vibes from this film. I don't know if that was an inspiration, but it kind of highlights just how much sacrifice, physically, mentally, personally, these athletes go through for their sport. Is that I assume that's one of the themes.
Yeah, totally. You couldn't ignore the wrestler. I couldn't ignore the wrestler at all. And I was a fan of the wrestler. I guess the difference between the wrestler and this sport is, like, the wrestler, Mickey Rourke's character, we start the film and he's already almost he's at the bottom of the heap already. And the only thing any further down he can go is death, really. That's the tragedy of it. And actually, at the end of the film, arguably he jumps into the ring, and because of his heart condition and everything, you could say that he virtually kills himself at the end of the film. So it's a pretty grim portrayal of a pretty gritty sport. Some people would even question whether it is a sport, that kind of wrestling, whereas with the racer and with cycling, it is absolutely a sport that has been corrupted by drugs. There's no doubt about it. But it's Dom isn't necessarily at the bottom of the heap. He's just reached a stage where, his body is not going to be able to take it much more. And he's finding it hard to accept that. That's really what it comes down to. But it's absolutely an influence. Raging Bull is an influence. I remember reading where Martin Scorsese said he was reluctant to be involved in the film because he hated wrestling. He says, I hate all sports. I hate all sports. Anything with a ball, I hate it, But actually, the film's not really about boxing. In fact, most of the fighting that happens in Raging Bull happens outside of the ring, at home, with his brother, with his wife, with his manager. You know what I mean? And I found that fascinating. And I think, although I did really want to do some exciting racing sequences, I was more interested in what was behind the scenes of cycling. Because you get to see cycling filmed beautifully during the Tour de France or the Giro d'Italia every year. It's just finished, but it's covered so well, but you don't see behind the scenes. It's just the sport you see.
What I also loved about it is, I've mentioned the honesty a couple times. I'm a big fan of inspirational sports movies. Who doesn't love seeing, the downtrodden kind of go up and win or, succeed. Absolutely. But, the way that this movie just kind of portrayed the entire sport and just kind of the personal sacrifice is just really fascinating to watch. So I think, and you're right, that's something that most people probably won't see because that's not something that's produced for the television network. So I think that was definitely the right choice to go with, and I enjoyed it.
Great, well, thank you. I do appreciate that. That's nice to hear. It's funny when you go to see a cycle race, for real, rather than watching it on television or whatever. It is just bizarre because you sit there, you wait for an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, and then you just go zoom, 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 and that's it. That passes, and that's it.
Yeah.
And then you go, what do we do now? Well, we could try. You want to try and catch up with them? You're never going to catch up with them. So that's it. So it's probably more suitable to actually seeing on television actually as a sport.
Yeah. but it still hit you, right? It still hit the experience stayed with you from your 1998 time. So
Very much so. I mean, and I wasn't a cycling fan. I knew nothing about it, and I've become a cycling fan. And I wasn't a huge sports fan, although I did like sports movies because they're always quite exciting, you know. It wouldn't normally be the kind of thing I would gravitate towards, but I was fascinated with the character because it is a character study, really, rather than a sports movie. And I did like the idea of a lot of the scenes where there's a bit of humor in them are ones that I've written, and I just like the camaraderie and the banter that goes on within teams. I think that's always quite fun to watch, you know.
yeah, definitely agree. You mentioned that Tartare was not based on, but could have inspiration from other, from a real life racer. Were there any other members of the team or the owner or Sonny, or any of them kind of loosely inspired by?
Yeah, no, I couldn't really say that. No, I mean, and actually, the Italian guy, it's really only afterwards we kind of thought back. We were like, wow, people could probably think that's Pantani, because he was a charismatic Italian rider that year. But nobody else really. There's no kind of direct correlation with any real life character. No.
Excellent. Good disclaimer.
Say it again.
Good disclaimer. These are not based on any real life people.
What was interesting though also was that you could have riders from all over the world, really, because each team is, although, for example, the guy who won the green jersey yesterday he's Irish, but he rides for a Belgian team. So although the glory goes, they play the Irish national anthem when he goes on the podium, but it's a Belgian team. It's located in Belgium, and they train out of Belgium and all that kind of stuff. So, but within that team, there's people from all over the world, and I like that idea. So there's a sprinkling of different nationalities, mostly European, although there's a Kiwi, a New Zealander in there. And then there's a German in there, but mostly European characters, and I like that idea. And Viking is Czech. And Iain Glen plays a Glaswegian from Glasgow. So yeah, it was just a nice mix of accents and languages. Actually, there's 5 different languages spoken in the racer. There's Flemish, which is Dutch. There's Irish. There's a little bit of Irish language in it. There's English. There's Italian, and there's French. And I'm sure there's a couple of words of Czech in there somewhere if you listen hard enough. So I like that idea. So it was like a European film in the true sense of the word,
I love that too, and I liked that everyone was comfortable, right? Because that must kind of just develop if you're spending all your time with these people from other countries. Like you just kind of become comfortable speaking in other languages, and that was a really interesting aspect. Where Dom, he's spoken French, English, Irish. Don't remember he spoke some Italian to Simoni, so it's or to Tartare. So yeah, it's it was just definitely a sprinkling of various languages and cultures.
Yeah, like I think 10 years prior to this film, when it was set in '98, everybody spoke French on the tour. Everybody. And actually, when Lance Armstrong came along and decided to do press conferences in English, they were horrified. Absolutely horrified. I mean, they were so precious, the French, about the Tour de France. And believe it or not, there hasn't been a French rider who's won the Tour de France since 1986.
Oh, wow. I actually didn't know that. Huh.
Yeah. The last one was a guy called Bernard, he was the last one to win the Tour de France. And like yesterday, it was a Slovenian guy or a Slovakian guy won it. And the year prior to that was a guy from South America. So it's no longer really the Tour de France French thing, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a tour of people going through France.
Yeah, that's it, exactly. Yeah, and then they come to other countries as well, like Ireland. I mean, it goes to, I don't know what other countries it went to this year. It might have been a bit more restrictive because of COVID, actually. But like the year before, it started in Belgium and it went to a bit of Italy and a bit of Spain and came back to France. It just always finishes on the Champs-Élysées in Paris,
Mm-hmm. So I want to talk about the cast because, like, the first thing I noticed, and I think you kind of highlighted this at the start, is they all pass the eye test. Like, they all look like they are professional cyclists. So I imagine they must have gone through a terrible training regime to get ready for this, or did you kind of try to find actors that maybe cycled in their free time?
With regard the Louis Talpe, the lead actor, played Dom. He was like fascinated and an ardent cyclist anyway, and like a real sportsman, but also an actor, which is amazing to come across. I mean, I was really lucky to find him, and he's very sympathetic looking, which I wanted him to look like. He doesn't speak that much. When he does speak, you know what I mean? He looked a bit put upon, like a domestique would be. He wasn't like all mouth and all that kind of stuff. And so you have to read a lot about from his face. But he was physically pretty fit, but he was, and sports people will understand this, his body fat mass index was at about between 18 and 20%. And for the film, he went down to 7%.
Oh, wow.
Which is quite a big drop. And he lost a lot of weight, and he made his body shape different to what it normally is. So those scenes at the beginning of the film where you see him with his top off and it looks like just he's a skeleton, they were done in the first few days of shooting because he wanted to be able to eat a little bit more normally. So we got those out of the way, and then he can go and eat normally, But the other guys, there was a lot of guys who do ride in the peloton, in the pack, like, on the other team. The actors obviously weren't first and foremost riders, but we got some professional riders in to teach them. They were on a boot camp for 10 days beforehand, which was pretty intense. But Louis was great because Louis was almost literally like a leader because he knew how to do it. He knew how to cycle, and he had a great bike, and he knew techniques. And the thing was to get the actors who were on bikes comfortable with riding quite close to other bikes. That's the thing that used to scare the actors more than anything, because one tip of a tire and they're gone, or, somebody in front. So they used to get terrified. So they got used to riding in groups close together. That's mainly what the boot camp was about. And obviously trying to get them to, when they would go to the sprint finish, to move the bike in the correct way that looks like they're sprinting. We did have one accident in the film.
I was about to ask about that, because that 10-day boot camp seems like a great idea, but also very dangerous. So.
Yeah. Actually, we had one guy came off during the boot camp, maybe two, which is kind of a warning. But what happened during the making of the film was we had a proper crash. I don't know if you recall, there's two crashes in the last stage. And the first crash is a small crash, right, where the yellow jersey rider comes off, and tumbles on the ground, and then 3 or 4 other riders go. Well, that was a real crash, and he ended up in hospital for 2 days afterwards.
Oh, wow.
So we happened to get it on film, though. And I said to them, guys, I was heartbroken that they couldn't shoot the next day with them, or the day after that, but we could shoot other stuff. But I said, look, guys, I don't want this to go to waste. Would you mind if we included it in the film? And they were delighted that they didn't fall off their bikes for no reason and end up in hospital for no reason. So, that ended up in the film. And then we had obviously there's a created crash later on where a guy walks out with a flag into the middle of the peloton and causes all sorts of trouble. So yeah, it wasn't without its, it was sometimes very nerve-wracking and dangerous even to be in a camera car alongside them and stuff like that, because one little move, that's it, So nerve-wracking.
Yeah, dangerous filming, but it was very intense. So it's also fascinating that you mentioned, Louis kind of acted as a domestique for the entire cast as well. He kind of just naturally slid into that role. It's very lucky for you, I guess.
Oh my God, I was so lucky, so lucky because, I'd seen a lot of really good actors who, actors are normally in pretty good shape, but we're talking, it's a different kind of shape when you're a cyclist, a really different kind of, look, and it's about stamina more than anything. And Louis knew he was going to have to do some serious riding, not as intense as doing a stage in the Tour de France, but, there was some pretty intense take after take, up and down a hill, so he had to be fit, but he really took the bull by the horns and steered us in the right direction. It's really great to have him on board. Yeah,
definitely. And yeah, he has such a great performance as really, really, fantastic character. So
good.
So now I'd like to just move on. I call it the lightning round. It's just very lightweight questions that kind of based on the movie or the characters, you can choose to answer them or not. I try to keep them very answerable. There's one that maybe you won't answer, but I guess we'll see when when we get to that.
Okay.
So first question is, have you attended the Tour de France? But you already answered that. I guess have you gone again since the '98 tour?
No, but I saw the Giro d'Italia came here, which about 4 years ago, and that came from Northern Ireland down to Dublin, and I went to watch that a couple of stages, which is great. But I haven't gone to the Tour de France since. But I've been to a number of race meetings. I was over in Belgium, and I met that team, Quick Step, with Sam Bennett, the Irish guy. I met that team, and I was on their tour bus, and I wanted to hear what it was like to hang out in a tour bus with a bunch of professional riders. So, which was quite eye-opening, actually. But it's different. It's different now than it was then. 20 years ago, it was pretty rough and ready. Like now, it's quite sophisticated. The buses are really state-of-the-art, and they don't have to do. Back in the old days, a rider would have to wash his own shorts and his own jersey in the sink in the hotel. That's actually true. But now, yeah, they have a washing machine on the bus, like, you know what I mean, continuously doing it for them, so.
Oh, wow. Well, that's awesome. And I guess the experience of watching the tour again, was it like you described, you kind of sit there, wait, and then zoom, 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 everyone goes by, and then
it's a bit like that. I was there for when they come over the line at the end and then get presented with the jerseys, which is obviously a bit more to it than just watching them fly by,
So do you ride bikes?
I have a bike. I have 2 bikes actually. And I try and use it as much as I can. Again, here in Ireland, the weather is up and down. So you look out and you see if it's going to rain. You decide whether you're going to get on the bike or not.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. And then I guess do you race bikes, or is it all recreational / exercise?
No, I'm in no shape to race. Believe me.
And then the movie didn't inspire you to kind of get on that bike and go for it?
No, not to race, but it did inspire me to do some more cycling, actually, to be honest. And the beauty of cycling and the freedom of cycling is something has really come to me because of the film. And as opposed to just thinking about cycling as a means to getting somewhere, it's the actual joy of cycling, and the feeling of cycling is really nice,
Yeah, no, definitely. I haven't done it yet, but it makes me want to kind of go out and just ride and kind of see what's around and see what it's like. Yeah. So do you play a sport?
I swim. That's about it. I swim.
That's a sport.
Yeah, it's a sport, absolutely.
What's your performance enhancing drug of choice? Is it caffeine?
Actually, believe it or not, it's tea.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, tea, which has caffeine and tannin in it. People don't think tea is much of something that gives you a kick, but I find it gives me more of a kick than coffee. Actually, even strong coffee, I find I get more of a kick out of a tea, actually, but not as intense. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just a longer kind of effect.
I find so mine's coffee. I find I can drink more tea, and maybe that kind of powers me more. But yeah, that intense initial kick is kind of what I'm looking for. So
yeah, the espresso shot. Yeah.
Yep. So one of the things I liked in this film is kind of seeing the riders like eat and drink, as they're biking. So have you ever eaten or drank on the road? It could be on a bike, car, however you want to interpret it.
Have I ever eaten? Not really. Maybe a drink. Maybe I've had a water bottle and taken a sip out of a water bottle. That's about it, really. I mean, these guys have to continuously keep feeding the machine.
Yeah, that like eating while you're in the middle of an intense workout session just sounds like the worst possible experience. But I guess your body just gets used to it.
That's it. These guys have to do everything on the bike. You saw he urinates off the bike at one stage. He vomits off the bike. I mean, everything happens on the bike. I mean, it's some of them when they're really going. I've heard they've even defecated themselves when they're rather than get off and stop.
I guess it makes sense.
Yeah, just to get that stage. Get that
time. So funny you should mention that. Next question is: have you ever relieved yourself on the road?
Have I?
Yeah.
Well, no, I've always taken time to stop and go up against a tree or something like that.
Excellent. And what's your go-to workout meal?
My go-to workout meal would be an omelette with oatmeal in it.
Like
And
in the omelet itself?
yeah, in the omelette, yes, it'll be an oatmeal omelette. And then I might kind of drizzle it with a little bit of maple syrup just to get a bit of a kick.
It's a good workout meal.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good. It's 2 eggs and the oatmeal. Yeah, works well.
And so if you could design, there's another race mentioned in this film. I imagine you've mentioned a few other races. If you could design your dream, race, where would you be biking through?
Well, some of the most beautiful countryside with the weather is in the south of France, around, Monaco, which they do cycle through on the Tour de France, but it's just that it's beautiful and the sun is always shining, sometimes shining a bit too much, but and I just can't imagine, rain is a killer when it comes to cycling. And we did have one rain scene in the film, actually, which we were very lucky. It just started lashing rain and we just turned over and I said, come on, let's do it. This will be another part of the, we can't have a film set during the Tour de France in Ireland without rain. So we got lucky. We got really lucky. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to ask about that. I can't imagine like trying to schedule the Tour de France in Ireland because just the weather's so unpredictable. But I guess they
just keep going. That's it. No matter what, it's like, rain, hail, snow, anything. That's it. Up the mountain, down the mountain. The wheel spins, then spins again. That's it.
And occasionally it slips, and then
that's it. Yeah.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me. This has been a lot of fun. I love the film. I think it's a very interesting title to add to the sports drama category. The characters are great. The story is really interesting, and everyone can check it out digitally. You can download it. You can buy it on pretty much any distributor. Watch it at home. Watch it maybe on your Peloton while you're getting inspired to go outside. So check out the film, and thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate chatting to you, and really appreciate that you appreciate the film. It's great to hear that. It's really nice feedback. Thank you very much indeed.
Definitely. Thank you.
All right.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, you powered to the finish. That was Kieron J. Walsh, a director, executive producer, and co-writer of The Racer. It's available digitally and on demand, so you can watch it at home on pretty much any device. If you like this interview, please like and subscribe to this channel. It helps us out a lot. And as always, go to watchyourpass.com for all your movie reviews, interviews, and recommendations. Thank you.